Good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Fundi. Welcome to the Health Matters podcast. Today, we have a very interesting, podcast that's going to be dealing with an issue that is of serious concern, in our society here in South Africa. So we are in the month of September, which happens to be my birth month. The month of September in our health calendar is actually referred to as Albinism Awareness Month. So we will be talking about matters relating to people living with albinism. We no longer refer to people who are living with albinism as albinos. Using that word, it's not really, politically correct or socially acceptable anymore. So we talk about people who are living with albinism. The challenge of albinism is actually relatively common throughout the world, right? It is very democratic in the sense that there's no one race that has it and the other race that doesn't have it. Every race group actually has people who are living with albinism. The only difference is that when it affects Black Africans or Asian people with a darker skin complexion, like in India and other parts of Asia, or even South America, because of that complexion, when they have got albinism, they stand out. But in Europe, there's a lot of people who have got albinism as well. But because their skin are already light pink, so when they have albinism, it is not so visible. So in many people's eyes, albinism is something that only affects Black Africans. So I just want to start there to say this is a condition, a health condition, or a health disorder that affects people of all races, of all ethnic groups, but in sub-Saharan Africa mainly, it becomes so visible. And because of lack of information, we're seeing a lot of social problems directed at people with albinism. A lot of stigmatization, a lot of discrimination, and generally lots of exclusion in various things, in our society, from childhood all the way up to adulthood. So we are going to talk about albinism today, and our show will be slightly different from the other shows in that we have voice notes, we have some videos from people, so it will be interactive in that sense. Yes, I will answer, I will clarify things, but we thought let's have more engagement from our viewers so that it becomes more of a people's show today. So that's really what we are going to be talking about today. I must say that there's a lot of myths in our society, or Southern Africa in general, or Sub-Saharan Africa. And some of these myths, sometimes they lead to loss of life, because then there are some people who will abduct and even kill people who are living with albinism because of a mistaken belief that their body parts have got some healing powers. I also remember in the early 2000s, at the height of HIV and AIDS in South Africa, there were people who believed that if somebody has sexual intercourse, unprotected sexual intercourse with a virgin that is somebody who's living with albinism, that will actually, cure their HIV infection. So you can see that some of these myths can actually be deadly or can actually commit somebody to long-term kind of infection. So it's so important that we tackle it, and I'm happy that we've got a lot of voice notes that will be coming and videos to be able to deal with these matters. And the last thing we will talk about at the end is albinism as a disability, and the issues relating to that, whether it actually is a disability or it's actually a socially constructed disability, So I'm not alone, as usual. I'm with Tasiga, Mr. Sipho Masigo. As always, we are driving this program together to make sure that we deliver, good content to all of you. Let me just say before he starts asking me questions, if you love our content, please subscribe, please share, so that other people can also, get this content. They say sharing is caring. Yeah. Sharing is caring. And maybe hit that thing that makes you to be notified when we are going live, so that you don't miss any of our content. So, Mr. Masigo, welcome.
Thank you very much, Doc. Always good to be part of the show to help you drive this ship. Always excited about that.
Lovely. So I understand we've got videos,
yes.
We've got voice notes. We went to the ground to get people's views or questions or myths. And like I said earlier, it's supposed to be an interactive show. So let's get on to the videos. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Here's the first one, trying to answer the question, what is albinism, which is our topic for today.
Finally, someone who's asking nicely and not being an ass about it. Albinism is basically when both your parents have an albinism gene and the kid comes out with albinism, which albinism is basically just a skin condition where you have no pigment or a lack of pigment throughout your body, which is why my hair is so blonde. My eyebrows are so blonde, white, whatever you want to call them. My eyelashes are really blonde. My eyes sometimes move. I have nystagmus. My beard is very, blonde. And I'm very, very pale, as you can see. I don't tan as well. I stay this color. So yeah, basically albinism is just a lack of pigment throughout your body. And it can cause other things like, vision problems. My vision is fucking horrible, which is literally from my albinism. So yeah, that's basically what albinism is.
Doc, that's a very outspoken young man telling us about what albinism is. And of course, here's a second guy.
My name is Bar Nation, and I have a genetic condition called albinism. And you might be asking yourself, what is albinism? Well, albinism is a genetic condition that affects my body's ability to produce melanin. This also means that it has an effect on my hair, my skin, and my eyes. So my hair is super blonde, my skin is super pale because my body doesn't have enough pigment to produce melanin. And my eyes is hazel brown but sometimes changes to green, but I'm not sure why actually. Albinism can also affect the development of my retina, which is the part of the eyes that help people to see. This is very common in most albinos, however, I train my eyes so that way I can see better from a distance. And lastly, our skin can be super sensitive to the sun, however, because I grew up in Africa, mine's a little bit different. But guys, if you have any questions about albinism, hit me up in the comment and I'll try to answer as much as I can.
There you have it, Doc.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Obviously, this is something that I always say to people that when you are living with a particular condition, especially a chronic condition, it's so important that you learn as much as you can about it. And in fact, I once again, during the height of HIV and AIDS, some of the best health educators on HIV and AIDS were people who were living with HIV and AIDS, because they were talking from experience.
True.
So here you've got two people who are living with albinism, and they have made it their business to actually share information and try and dispel some of the myths relating to people who are living with albinism. Now, the first guy, very interesting guy, I'm not sure some of the words he uses, I think there should be parental guidance, PG-18, he's talking, hey, people must not be an ass, and fucking this, so that's quite interesting. But he's making a good point, though, that albinism is a genetic disorder.
Okay.
Right? So there is a problem in the genes of the parents. Now, at a technical level, I don't want to go deep, but at a technical level, we talk of autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive. So with diseases that are carried through an autosomal dominant gene, you just need one parent with that gene, and then the child, if they get that gene, it will express itself.
Okay.
Now, albinism is not like that. It is an autosomal recessive, meaning one parent with the gene, it will not produce a child with albinism. You need a mother and a father, both of them, to have these autosomal recessive genes, because they, it's power of the two genes, from the mom and from the dad, which combined, then the child will express albinism.
Okay.
Otherwise, with one of those genes, the parent becomes a carrier. All right, because with one of those genes of albinism, it will not show. So, but it is there. So it's almost like a lotto, because you don't know which parent is going to have the other gene, and then all of a sudden there is a child with albinism. So I just wanted to clear it. But we also are seeing a lot of people where there is no history of familial involvement, that is with albinism, because the genes, there's what we call mutation. Something happens, and then the gene is altered, and then, you start having, people expressing albinism without any history. Obviously, again, it must be from both parents, So it is a genetic disorder. The bottom line is that these genes, they affect the cells in our skins or in the eye that produce pigment called melanin.
Okay.
All right. So people with albinism, they have got a problem of not being able to produce that melanin, that pigment. Or if they are able to, they produce it in small quantities. So that then makes them to have skin that's very light, almost pinkish. And one thing that the first gentleman mentioned is that he does not tan. You know that when you are exposed to the sun, the cells, the melanocytes, will produce more pigment, such that that area that was exposed to the sun becomes darker. But because these guys don't have those cells that produce pigment, they can stay for 24 hours under the sun, they will not have any tan. So that's one of the differentiators, of this thing. So they do not tan. So that is the main feature. And I just want to clarify the last thing, is that there's two types, broadly, of albinism.
Okay.
There's what we call oculocutaneous. Oculo means eyes, cutaneous means skin.
Okay.
So those people are born with inability to produce pigment on both the skin and also the eyes.
Okay.
If I look at your eyes, there's like a brownish black thing around that thing, the iris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for people who are living with albinism, there isn't pigment, so it appears as green, or bluish, because there's no pigment. Yeah. So when it affects the eyes and the skin, we call it oculocutaneous, skin and the eyes. That is the one that is most common. But the second type only affects the eyes. So somebody is living with albinism, but it doesn't affect the skin. It only affects the eyes. So we call that oculoalbinism. All right? Okay. So you may not be able to see it, because all we know is it must affect the skin. But I want to say there are those who are living with albinism, but it only affects the eyes. But they are in the minority.
And then if it affects the eyes, does it make your sight problematic?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Obviously, whether it is oculocutaneous or it is the ocular type, as long as it has affected the pigment in the eye, it affects vision, you know. But those are, I don't know if you want us to get into the symptoms around that.
I think, Doc, we did say that you wanted to hear from the people.
Yeah, let's hear from the people, but
hear.
I will come in.
Yeah.
Safe to say, yes, when the eyes are affected, ultimately the vision is affected, the quality of vision, but there are other problems as well that have to do with the sensitivity of the eye to light, which makes their eyes, you know, to not stay stable. You know, we call that nystagmus, and the first guy did talk about that.
Oh, yes.
But sometimes there may also be a squint situation that is formed as a result of, you know, this condition. We call that strabismus, which can be corrected through surgery. So, yes, there are a number of vision or eye-related problems that do happen with people that have got, you know, oculocutaneous or ocular albinism.
Okay, cool. Doc, let's hand over to the people from the streets. They want to get involved in our conversation. Let's take a listen to the first one.
Good day. My name is Renee, and I have a question about albinism. I've only been exposed to Black Africans who seem to have this disease. Again, do we even call it a disease? And I've been curious as to whether white people, Indian people, colored people, Chinese people, or any other race are prone to albinism, as it seems that Black Africans are. I would love to get a response to this question. Thank you.
There you have it, Doc.
Yeah, well, at the beginning, I mentioned this point that this health condition or a health disorder is democratic.
Okay.
Meaning, any person from any race group or any ethnic group can have albinism.
Yeah.
The only difference is that with the other population groups, it may not be easy to pick it up, especially those of European descent. But as actually, you know, people of Indian origin who have darker skin, I've seen many of those who have albinism. And also, you know, people from other parts of the world, they do suffer. And by the way, it's not only human beings that have got the problem of inability to produce pigment.
Okay.
Even animals.
What?
You know, even animals. That's why if you go to some of these reptile places, you find that there's a python.
Yes, you're
that,
right.
that actually,
Yeah.
you know, has a much lighter, you know, skin.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it happens with the other animals as well.
Tigers, I've seen
and all
yeah.
of that.
Yeah,
You see,
yeah.
so
Lions, yeah.
yes, so it is a problem that affects human beings, but it can also affect other animals, and so they will look different to the other. I'll call them mainstream, you know, kind of you know, animals. So it affects any person of any race group, and it can even affect animals as well.
Her question was, can we call it a disease?
Well, again, in this day and age where we are careful about what we say,
Yeah.
I would rather not use the word disease.
Okay.
Because when you say disease, people already think it's infectious.
Yeah. Okay.
You know? So this is a problem that affects the skin only, nothing below the skin, just the skin. and it's not infectious, so there is no worry, or there shouldn't be any worry that you date somebody who's living with albinism.
Yeah.
It's not going to jump from that person to you.
Yeah.
So it is not infectious. So we would rather say it's a health condition,
Okay.
or it's a health disorder,
Yeah.
or a medical condition or medical disorder. That is not infectious. But the problem is in the genes, and it is not curable. So there's no magical tablet or magical muti that you can go and get to actually reverse the situation.
Okay. Doc, let's hear voice note number 2. There we go.
I'm going to try and demystify albinism. So, first things first, many people think albinism only affects people, which is not true, because corner like animals and plants that also have albinism, which is just the absence of pigmentation. So we all know the darker you are is the more melanin you have. So people who have or who suffer from albinism are just people who have lesser melanin, or some of them do not have melanin at all. So that's all the albinism is. And one of the myths that I really do not like is people believe Uguti albinos do not die, they disappear, which it's ridiculous, but it's one of the beliefs or myths that we have in society, where albinism, as I said, it's just a disorder causing skin to lack pigmentation, or it's the absence of melanin in the skin. And as I said, it's not just affecting like human beings or people, it also affects like animals and plants. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I didn't know that plants are also affected, Doc.
Indeed, because plants have got pigment, and so there are diseases that can affect pigment production in the leaves of the plants, and so you'll find that they will express themselves differently. So, but I think what is common, whether we're talking a human being or an animal or even a plant, is about a disorder that affects the production of pigment. Pigment that is necessary to protect the skin.
Okay.
Yeah, because like I said, too much sun rays to protect the skin from damage. The cells, melanocytes, will produce more pigment. So it's a protective mechanism, So, I mean, there's often a term that black stone crack.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard that.
Yes,
where somebody's in their 50s or 60s and you look at their skin, there's hardly any wrinkle.
Yes.
Like me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you look at somebody from European descent,
Yeah.
Who are born obviously with less melanin than us,
Yes.
you'll find that already in their 40s they are starting to have more wrinkles.
True.
Because they don't have enough melanin to protect them from the damaging sun rays.
Yes.
You see, so that's, God is a very good engineer.
Yeah.
He knew that there will be these rays that come from the sun. And if they hit your skin, they are likely to cause damage. And therefore, the skin must defend itself by producing more pigment. And more pigment, more protection.
Yeah.
No pigment or very little pigment, the chances of skin cancer become high. That's why, for example, in the Southern Hemisphere, like places like Australia, which is largely people of European descent, the rates of skin cancer are very high, and they tend to have a lot of outdoor activities, so the risk of skin cancer is very high. I'm not saying it's not the case here as well. African sun can be very harsh. And so, again, those people with less melanin, the chances of them getting skin cancers is very high. So when we talk about people who are living with albinism, especially the oculocutaneous one, the one that affects the skin, the risk of them getting skin cancers is actually quite high. So I think it's important to make that point very clear.
Yeah.
They cannot produce enough pigment, therefore they cannot protect their skins. And we will come back to this point when we are talking about what needs to be done to make sure that they protect their skins, what should be done to make sure that they protect their eyes. Because if there's too much exposure to the sun rays, their skins will have a problem. And in fact, you will normally see people who are living with albinism that their skin tends to wrinkle very quickly.
It's true. Yeah, I've seen,
Yeah.
Doc, he mentioned the other myth that he wanted to demystify about people dying, people living with
Yes,
disability.
I mean, it is man.
Tanditori, Doc.
And this is whether you are in the township or Komahaying is Lalini. This is one of those common myths. People are saying, no, people who are living with albinism, they do not die. They simply disappear. What a lot of hogwash. That's nonsense. When I say nonsense, it means no sense. No sense. I mean, the only difference between me and somebody who's living with albinism is just the amount of pigment on the skin. Nothing more. There is nothing that's deeper than the skin. Now, why would they just disappear? They've got a heart like I have a heart. They've got a lung they've got lungs like I have a lung. They've got a liver. They've got a kidney. They are human beings like me and you. The only difference is the issue of pigment. So if they die, they will be dying because of health conditions that can cause death to anybody. So there's no specific things that they die from. And the answer is that people with albinism, they can live very long lives. Obviously, there are certain risks that are unique to them that they need to manage from young age. And I know of people, I mean, the person who used to champion the interests of people who are living with albinism, Umamuma Zibuku, who used to be in the Commission for Gender Equality. Yes. I mean, since the 70s, when she started an organization called the Albinism South Africa, ASA, she's been championing, the interests of people who are living with albinism. And one of the things she had to deal with was to demystify these myths that people don't die. Yes, in terms of numbers, there are not as many as the people who don't have albinism. And so their funerals will be far and few. So, but the fact that we have not been invited to their funeral does not then become proof that, and in fact, in our society, you don't get invited to a funeral, but the problem is the society that actually excludes people with albinism, and so there's a lot of discrimination. So it may well be that because of that discrimination, they may not be buried maybe in the same locality. They go and be buried elsewhere, because what happens at times is that people will go and dig those graves,
That makes sense.
to get the body parts for multi-purposes. And so publicizing that kind of funeral may not be as much as people who are not living with albinism. So that's why people may not be aware, or they may be buried sooner at a location that is not disclosed because of the risk that their graves may actually be tampered with because people are looking for their body parts, but not that they disappear.
Makes sense. Let's take a listen to another voice note, Doc. Let's take a listen to this.
So igama lami nguLerato Tshwana, and I'd like to share what I know in terms of fictions and facts regarding albinism. So I'm a 2000 baby. So with us, one of our fictions or the myths that we used to actually hear regarding albinism was abantu abadala. At some point there was a very weird synergy, or basically energy they were coming with when you actually have sex with an albino, you're gonna be cured of your HIV and AIDS. And at that point, I think HIV and AIDS was at its peak. So now, as I'm grown, I realize ukuthi, like, scientifically that doesn't make sense. So, and I just now realized also that was actually fiction. And Namanje is something that was going on, which was might have been 3 to 5 years ago, where we were getting like abantu with this kind of disease, they were getting kidnapped, they were getting human trafficked, because of it was believed ukuthi inyanga zokhona ukuthi zenze umuthi with, they are part of a museum, and which is totally false.
There you have it, Doc.
Yeah, you know, even millennials, or Gen Zs, you know, they know about these myths. You know, and I think I've answered this before.
Yeah.
This myth that somehow you can prevent certain diseases from happening to you if you engage in sexual activity with somebody who is living with albinism. There is no substance to that. If anything, it is just part of the stigma and the misinformation and disinformation that is out there, which needs to be dealt with. I must say that whenever there is stigma, the underlying cause is lack of information. It's ignorance. You will remember that at the beginning of COVID-19, there were people who were up in arms in communities when maybe a person was the first person from that particular village to be diagnosed with COVID. For example, in Sekhukhune, in Limpopo, there was a gentleman who was actually killed because he had COVID. The community Sekhukhune felt that it's a shame to that village and is bringing, you know, but when you look into it, they did not understand COVID-19.
Yes.
And instead of getting information on COVID-19, they decided to take the law into themselves and killed the gentleman.
Mob justice.
Mob justice. Yeah, well, it's not even
It's
justice.
not even justice,
Yes, it's actually just
mob crime.
yes, it's a mob crime. Let me give you another example. A lady in Kwamashu, I've just forgotten her name now. I think it's Madlala, the surname, but I've just forgotten. But she was amongst the first people in Kwamashu in the 90s to openly talk about living with HIV and AIDS. She was stoned to death. Right? She was stoned to death. And when you look into it, it was ignorance, lack of information. Once again, during COVID, there was a hospital that was designated to be a hospital that will have a lot of patients who are recovering from COVID-19, somewhere in KZN. The community in that area, they were up in arms that their hospital cannot be used to house people who are recovering from COVID. And they actually protested and were blocking ambulances from going to the hospital. So the issue of social stigma is as a result of lack of information. It's about ignorance. But the actions that they take in their ignorance can actually lead to very, very serious situations and even death of people. And so even with albinism, there are just so many people who don't have the right information, and they perpetuate stigma or stigmatization. They perpetuate discrimination, and they perpetuate a situation that people who are living with albinism be like second-class citizens. And it need not be like that.
Absolutely. All right, so let's take a listen to another voice note, Doc, that has just come through. Let's take a listen to this.
Affect a person who is living with albinism, especially in our continent, in certain sections of our community where people still believe that body parts of a person who's living with albinism can acquire luck for you. They can cure certain rare diseases. I feel it is important to raise awareness of what the actual disease is, and to make it a point that we always educate people of what the albinism is, that it is just a genetic disease that causes lack of pigmentation or lack of melanin, and it doesn't mean that a person, when they lack melanin, then they are therefore special or have this mystic ability within them to cure certain diseases or to acquire a luck for certain individuals, right? Because I feel if that is still the idea within certain sections of our community, we're still going to experience instances where people who are living with albinism are getting killed and they're getting human trafficked. So it is important to always raise awareness of what the actual disease is, and simplify it and always break it down, especially starting from kids to throughout to adults, to explain what the actual disease is.
There you have it, Doc. He sounds like he was at some club or tavern or something.
Yes. You know, the issue of albinism and the social stigma, discrimination, marginalization of people who are living with albinism is actually a serious problem. You know, a few years ago, the WHO, after they had recognized albinism as a disability, although it's a socially constructed disability, because technically, I don't believe it is truly a disability, because not everybody who's got albinism is disabled. There are those who may have visual impairment, you know, then therefore are unable to do certain things because of that. That becomes a disability.
Yes.
But there are many who, with corrected, vision, using glasses and other tools, are actually able to do anything. So not everybody, in my view, who has got albinism has actually got a disability. But let me go. So when the WHO recognized people with albinism as a disability, the United Nations Human Rights Council appointed an independent expert to actually monitor human rights issues of people with albinism. And that independent expert was actually here in South Africa, visited many African countries, but spent a lot of time here in South Africa. This is just before COVID-19, you know, and then she reported back to the Human Rights Council. And what she said was there were a lot of challenges regarding access to health of people who are living with, you know, albinism. There was a lot of discrimination. There was a lot of challenges in terms of education system, in terms of protecting their rights. There were a lot of challenges in terms of them entering into employment. There were a lot of challenges relating to access to justice and harmful practices. And she also mentioned that there were various community awareness initiatives, that were linked to the Regional Action Plan on Albinism in Africa, and that which was adopted by the African Union. So I'm reading this to show you that these social challenges that they are experiencing are actually receiving attention at SADC level, that is the region, at AU level, at United Nations level, at WHO level, because they are concerning, because it's actually violation of their human rights. And I think we have a duty, all of us, to stand up and advocate and support people who are living with albinism. Because, like I said, the only difference is pigment, nothing more.
I mean, I think I like what the last guy spoke about, that there needs to be more awareness, like you say, that we need to teach the younger kids.
Yes.
Because they can receive this information a lot more easier than adults.
Yes, and it mustn't be just during September.
Yes.
Because it's Albinism Awareness Month. And I've shared this with some of the organizations in South Africa that are actually advocating for people who are living with albinism. I mean, one of those is, Albinism South Africa, which is led by Mamuma Zibuko. But there are others that are more national as well. And I've said they need to come up with an annual program of increasing awareness so that more people can be informed, and that should then translate to less stigma, less discrimination, less marginalization, more of inclusion, and we're talking diversity in our country. We need to be inclusive of everyone. So the lack of ongoing awareness sessions, on TV, print media, and all of the other platforms that are available nowadays, there isn't enough of information sharing about this condition. And so this thing of rogue traditional healers. I mean, we talked about traditional healers, I think a week or two ago.
Yes.
Healers are called to heal, right? When now somebody who's supposedly a healer, they now deal with body parts. They make people to be abducted and killed. That is no longer a healer.
True.
That is a witch. So that Witchcraft Suppression Act that was there before should have been kept for people like those.
Absolutely.
So there is no way you can be healed through body parts harvested from somebody who is living with albinism. We need to make sure that, I know there was a case in Mpumalanga that went to court of a traditional healer who had actually paid people to abduct, and also in KZN, to abduct a child who was living with albinism. So that has got no room or place in the modern world. Wherever it happens, we need to make sure that we report such things, because honestly, that's a violation of other people's rights, and it cannot be tolerated in our country.
Absolutely, Doc. Doc, 2 more voice notes to go. Here's the next one. Let's take a listen to this.
Good day, my name is Renee and
Hi, it's your girl Seed Under. The myths that I know about albino, like even growing up, it was a thing that I needed to have an albino friend so that I can ask these questions, that these things, do they really happen? I mean, do they really live a life like a normal life like us, like people with melanin? But I then found out with the one friend that I made that they're quite normal, but I think they just have, I don't know why I don't know what the logic is behind or behind them being born like that. But most of the time they would then say it's the parents, they were not eating right, or they were having too much milk. You never know. people have a lot of myths when it comes to albino people. But I think I think I think what makes them like that is lack of something. There must be lack of something. Whatever it is, the gene that we have that makes us melanin, it's the white people that don't have it. And they're not seen as albinos. But within the white community as well, there are those that are called ginger, which in a clear form will be called an albino. But hey, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I don't know. Let me go around and ask more for you.
Wow. So, but, I like the way she's talking about this. Firstly, she shows that she's been interested to understand the cause.
Yes.
The main reason for people to have albinism is that they have genes from mother and father, which when they combine, they produce a child who will live with albinism. What happens is that the cells on the base of the skin that are called melanocytes, because there's a defect in the production of melanin, the pigment that they produce. They may produce zero melanin, or they'll produce less melanin than normal. That's the only difference. It's got nothing to do with what one ate or did not eat. It's got nothing to do whether you drank milk too much or you didn't drink milk too much. So it is not an issue that has to do with what one ate or did not eat. It's got everything to do with whether there is the recessive gene that is predisposing them to this, and where a mother and a father have got the same gene, then one presents with albinism. But like I said earlier, there are those people where there's no familial history on both sides, but it's a mutation of a gene that then leads to pigment production that is defective. That's all. So, but I like, she seems empathetic towards people who are living with, albinism, and she would like to know more. And I'm glad we've got people like that in society, because we really need to inform ourselves and stop taking information that is in social media or wherever that can actually perpetuate stigma and discrimination.
Absolutely. Doc, so we've got about 10 minutes to go, and my question is, you did say that it's not curable.
Yes.
But let's say, for example, you meet a new girlfriend and you are not sure about your situation. Can you get tested to see your genes and her genes so that you don't have a situation like that? I'm not saying that, it's a bad thing.
Are you saying the person must first pass that test, before you can commit? There are so many other other health conditions out there.
Yeah.
Are you saying, because then there's so many things that one can screen for.
Yeah.
So why pick up this one? But anyway,
yeah.
One of the things that we advocate for, especially in people who have got this history in their families, is what we call genetic counseling. Yeah, because then there are ways of being assessed, looked at the genes, so that then you could be advised appropriately, by people who are experts in this area. So we always say, those people with a family history who know that there is a risk, they are carriers, and maybe they are meeting somebody else, and they want to know if they have got the gene. I think as an agreement between the couple, that is something that is available, genetic counseling, and maybe they may then, it doesn't mean also, so they may be able to look at other ways of having a baby, but there's nothing wrong with having a baby who has got, albinism, because it's just on the surface, it's the skin, and yes, it's on the eyes, and I just believe it's God's gift, and you deal with what comes. But other people would like to have a choice, and be able to, before they actually, make a baby, to get proper counseling. Because, yes, the risk will always be there if they come and they've got the gene. But there's no way of preventing it. There's no tablet you can take to say, okay, if I take this tablet, then my child will not have, if both yourselves have got the gene. So it's all in the genes. It's got nothing to do with the food. It's got nothing to do with what you drink. It's got everything to do with information that is carried in that gene that predisposes one to, albinism.
Are there any other health challenges that come with it? Being?
So I think I've already mentioned that there are basically two areas of the body that are affected.
Yeah.
One, it's the skin, where there's no melanin or there's little melanin. And therefore, the skin complexion will be different. It will be very light, okay? Now, when the skin is like that, when it is exposed to the sun rays, then the sun rays, they easily damage the structure of the skin, the collagen, which is the building block of the skin, and that may lead to wrinkling. It may lead to freckles, small freckles, which sometimes can turn into moles.
Oh yes, I've seen the moles.
Others, you can have what we call giant freckles as well.
Oh yes,
that also can cause cancerous development. So the big thing is the skin tends to age very quickly. It gets damaged very easily from the sun rays, and therefore there is a problem. There is a problem, that they may have moles that turn into cancer, melanomas, or basal skin cancer, basal cell, basal cell cancer of the skin. So that's the main problem. And therefore, from early childhood, the parents need to know that they need to make sure that the child is always covered, especially when they go outside where there's a chance. Even when they go to play, they are covered. What is normally the sun-exposed areas, they cover them. Have a large hat. I mean, if you go to prep schools nowadays, or junior prep, you'll find that they've got these big hats that are supposed to reduce the sun rays. So the child, whenever they are playing with other children outside, they must have that. They must have, sunscreen, SPF 30 and above, because you are now saying, I know that there is this potential risk, and therefore let me prevent it from happening. And whenever then there are certain things that are looking abnormal on the skin, go and consult a dermatologist as soon as possible. So that's one of the important things. The second thing is the eyes. Remember, I mentioned that this pigment, this lack of pigment, doesn't only affect the skin, but it also affects the iris, and also affects the retina. The retina is that part of the eye that actually receives the images, when we look at something, the images, you go through that the pupil.
Okay.
you know,
Yes.
yeah, into a particular area on the retina.
Okay.
We call it a fovea. The area that makes the images that then go through with the optic nerve to the brain to be interpreted, so that I can say, this is so and so, or this is a laptop, or yes. So now, with lack of pigment or inadequate pigment formation, then the development of the iris, and the development of the retina, and even sometimes even the optic nerve may be affected. So you then find that the people with albinism, they've got a problem of light sensitivity. And because they are sensitive to light, their eyes are always, moving side to side, as a way of trying to protect the eye. We call that nystagmus. So when you look at people who have got, who are living with albinism, their eyes, more often than not, they've got nystagmus.
Move from side to side.
Yes.
Okay.
They don't focus on one place.
Oh, okay.
Because of the light sensitivity.
And
so
then they also blink a lot.
Yes. So it's a body's way a natural way to try and limit the exposure to the light.
Oh.
Number two, because of that, some of them may have strabismus, that is squint, where one eye is focusing there, the other one is focusing to the side. But that can be corrected so that the eyes can focus on the same thing.
Yes.
And sometimes the quality of what they see may be affected, in which case you'll find that the child may need glasses early on, very thick glasses. But there are also other vision aids that they may need, what do you call it? But the glass, a magnifying glass, to be able to, see certain things. So, skin care, eye care, seeing a specialist of the eyes, ophthalmologist, on an annual basis, at least once a year, should be routine, as early as possible. And obviously, I've already said, making sure that they cover their body as much as they can. But the problem then, in a country like ours, where there's a lot of poverty, not many parents can afford these serial visits to see specialists. If you come from Tabase, where I come from in the Eastern Cape, how many people will have access to where there are eye specialists? They may have to travel, a long distance to be able to see those kind of professionals. So issues of health access, despite knowledge, may still be a limitation. But it's important that the parents know that eye care, skin care, there is an initiative, I must say, we always talk about negative things about our country, but there's also a lot of initiatives that are out there to try and help those families that are struggling. I was part of that a few years ago, and there's a dermatologist that I actually, brought along, and she's still assisting people with albinism. It's a dermatologist that's based here at Fourways, and she's also got practices in other parts of Johannesburg. Dr. Mushiana. She organizes pharmaceutical companies to donate these kind of creams, that will ensure protection from the sun, and other things that are important. So she's just doing it voluntarily. Bunolo Mushiana, Dr. Bunolo Mushiana. And sometimes she organizes other dermatologists or even eye specialists to come to the gatherings of the parents, so that the parents can be given proper information around skincare, and also around eye care. So we need more of that. And I think also the organization that, or the organizations that deal with advocacy in this space, they need to be united. What I picked up was that they are not always pulling in the same direction.
They work in silos.
They do work in silos. Sometimes, there's politics around funding and things like that. And I think it's not necessary. I hope they won't be angry with me for saying this, but as an outsider wanting to be part of assisting, I found it disheartening, that people were more focusing on that rather than actually doing the best they can for the constituency that really needs their assistance.
Absolutely, Doc. Doc, I think we've come to the end. I don't know if you have 1 second to close.
Well, I think there's so much to say around this topic. I think the only thing I need to say is that in a country where we want everyone to be included, in the workplace specifically, we need to make sure that we don't close opportunities to people who are living with albinism. Sometimes they are just brought in to be put at the reception so that people can tick and say we've employed so many people with disabilities. But they've got the brains like any other person. They've got, abilities. They should be considered for advancement within workplaces. So as part of Employment Equity Act, they need to be advanced. We are not doing that as a country, that is our workplaces. So I think our government needs to tighten their monitoring around this area. Not just people with albinism, but other people with disabilities as well. So let's make use of the potential of all South Africans. Let's not exclude others for reasons that are really basically stupid. So I'm saying let the awareness about albinism continue. We need justice for people who are living with albinism. We need empathy for people who are living with albinism. And they are not looking for handouts, but they are looking for constructive partnerships. So let's work with those NGOs and help them to deliver on their mandate.
Oh, absolutely. Doc, thank you very much. This has been informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tasiga, and thank you to our production team. And I hope this will be one of those podcasts that people will find useful.
Absolutely. Thank you.